didn't really like what I saw in the mirror. I didn't really like the way I was eating. I didn't really like the way that I was behaving as a founder, my relationship with God. It was almost like all of these feelings had been welling up inside of me for so long that I just had this moment that I snapped.
Feeling successful perhaps before the results show. So like you have to be able to believe that you can be successful. You have to believe that you can do the things that you're saying.
Our good friend Trip Eisen, he basically created this mini version of 75 Hard for August. Wake up at 5 a.m. or earlier every single day. Do at least 1 hour of exercise a day. Stick to a diet. Can't cheat once the entire month. No porn or masturbation or anything like that. I think 80% of who Brett is supposed to be is still like locked up and not coming out. I was like, this is exactly what I need.
If it's in the future, then it's not going to happen. If it's always in the future, it's not here. We are winning right now.
I know it's the moment, by the way. I know it.
Brett.
Brother.
Welcome back to the show, man.
Thanks for having me on. Part 2, a little solo action.
We've been deliberating on this for a while. I think it's in due time. I'm glad to be here. I just had a question come to me literally just now before we press record. What's changed since the last time you were on the show?
Do you remember how long it's been since Harry and I came on for part 1?
November, I believe.
November. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's some pretty big differences, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, there have been a few things. I mean, so you had recently started working with us, which has been an absolute blessing of an experience. I just want to go on record saying like you are genuinely one of my favorite people. And when I look back at this last year, because we're already getting into the back half of 2024, which is crazy, you've genuinely been one of the biggest blessings in my life, dude. So I just appreciate the friendship. Seeing your growth the last couple months has been incredible. But, you know, what's funny is that from November through July, not much changed, to be honest with you. It was kind of this, it almost felt like a washing machine between the Meat Mafia podcast, the marketing agency, which you're a part of, and then Noble Origins, which is our supplement company. And I just continue to have this feeling of when I would go to bed, just that there was so much more of me, of Brett, like locked up inside myself. And what's interesting is that being in the media space, you just connect with so many amazing people that give you incredible playbooks. And if you just listen to those people and just start implementing and start taking action, your life will radically transform. And to be honest with you, going into July, I didn't really like what I saw in the mirror. I didn't really like the way I was eating. I didn't really like the way that I was behaving as a founder, the way that I was approaching my work, my relationship with God. There were just a lot of things that felt more like red boxes versus green check marks. And it was kind of it was almost like all of these feelings had been welling up inside of me for so long that I just had this moment that I snapped at the end of July in a good way. And I think the snap is necessary. That's something that Zach Pogrob talks about, who runs the Obsession account, is like you just kind of have this moment where the disgust is channeled in a good way, because then you can start to take action. So what happened was our good friend Trip Eisen, who runs the ADY podcast, Ain't Dead Yet podcast, amazing guy. He's almost like my real life version of David Goggins in some way, and he's also a brother too.
Yep.
He basically created this mini version of 75 Hard for August. So it's a very simple challenge, and the steps are just wake up at 5 a.m. or earlier every single day, do at least 1 hour of exercise a day, stick to a diet, can't cheat once the entire month, call a family member or loved one friend and just thank them for being in your life. You can't drama dump on them. Compliment a stranger, take a progress picture, for men, like no porn or masturbation or anything like that. And then I'm trying to think,
cold exposure?
3 minutes of cold exposure. You have to journal 1 word in the morning, 1 word at night, and then get some spiritual time with God every single day. So it seems like a lot, but it's very simple, but extremely effective. And when he sent that challenge out, I immediately latched onto it. And once he sent the rules over, I was like, this is exactly what I need. I shouldn't have to rely on a challenge to like snap me back into this ideal version of myself. But he put together an amazing playbook, and he's the type of friend where he gives you that tough feedback that you ultimately need. He's incredible with accountability, which is like what I hope to be as a friend. I know that's what you hope to be as a friend too. And so I am on day 26 of that challenge, down 13 pounds, feel like I'm in the best shape that I've been in the last couple of years, just feel sharper, more mental acuity, more confidence, more trust, better relationship with God, loving going to work every single day, excited about the future. And then also in tandem with that, I actually ended up hiring an executive coach as well, Chris Lieto, who's been a podcast guest of ours. Incredible endurance athlete. He came in second at the Kona Ironman, I believe, in 2008. And so between doing
That's
that,
insane.
yeah, dude,
It's like insane.
if anyone looks up Chris Lieto, he is absolutely peeled. Like, he's either 50 or close to 50. He doesn't have an ounce of fat on him. And outside of just being a physical specimen, he has this unbelievable gift to really like almost crack you open and expose what are these things, whether they're conscious or subconscious, that have been holding you back. And then how do we take that and kind of elevate that to the next level? So those have been two amazing shifts. And I think it's just a good reminder that like you can feel like you're not heading in the right direction, and you can choose in an instant to be the person that you want to become. And I still have a long way to go, dude. I'm only 26 days in, but I genuinely feel, act, and operate like a different person. So I'm proud of that.
Yeah, you should be. There's definitely it's been a tangible, visceral change, I think. What do you think compelled you in late July to make that, like, to flip that switch? What was like describe to me like the emotions or like the way that you were feeling that was like, okay, well, you need to do something, and then here's the decision. Like, what were the feelings that led up to making that decision?
Yeah. Well, part of it was turning 30 at the end of June. And I think there's this kind of like arbitrary goal that a lot of men have, that they maybe want to have a certain amount of finances in their bank account by the time they turn 30. Hey, I want to make $1 million by the time I turn 30, or whatever those goals are. And when I turned 30 this year, it was this really interesting combination of being really proud of a lot of the things that we've done the last couple of years and who I've become as a person. And also just that feeling of like, dude, there's like, you're entering this new decade, and there's still this feeling of like, I think 80% of who Brett is supposed to be is still like locked up and not coming out because of the actions and decisions that I choose to make on a daily basis. And so I think there was just something that happened at the end of July where I really thought about where I wanted to be by the end of the year, a year down the road, 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road. And just this feeling of like, dude, it's what you want is truly possible. It's not just this pipe dream that you would maybe manifest about or pray about. It's actually possible. You know exactly what to do. You have the exact playbook. You've done these things before. What would it actually look like if you just combined all of those things day in and day out and got to as close of 100% of Brett in a healthy way that I could become? And what does that look like on the other end of that? So for me, it was like, it wasn't even about results. It was more of that feeling. I think success is ultimately a feeling. And if you chase that feeling of your head hitting the pillow and you got incrementally better, and also you couldn't have done any more that day, the score will take care of itself.
Yeah, I love what you just said. Success is a feeling, because Bobby, who you're actually to me today, we talk about feelings all the time and how actually important they are. Because this is why so many billionaires, or there's a lot of wealthy people. Andrew Carnegie says millionaires seldom smile. Henry Ford said a mechanic. I was happier doing a mechanic's job. Two of the most wealthy people that have ever walked the face of the earth. I think that's why a lot of wealthy people have all the material items, but perhaps they don't have that feeling of success, which is very draining, and perhaps it sounds kind of miserable. I think one of the things that's cool is the idea of feeling successful perhaps before the results show. It's almost illusion, but there's another idea. You listen to Founders Podcast, probably my favorite podcast I've ever listened to. Thank you for putting me onto that. He always talks about belief comes before ability. So like, you have to be able to believe that you can be successful. You have to believe that you can do the things that you're saying. You mentioned like the end goal being possible, like it's not some pipe dream. If you could share a little bit about what that is for you, you don't have to get whatever depth that you want, but like, what is the vision that you have in your head that you're holding on to and working toward?
Yeah. And I think you probably sense this in my tone too. When I'm speaking, I'm not trying to be negative at all. I just want to like actually be real, raw, and vulnerable, because I think it's so easy for people that you see that have either media companies or businesses or whatever to really just give you like the highs of that experience, but you don't really understand like the depths of what that founder or that person is going through too. And so I ultimately want to say this just more so just to speak words of encouragement to people that like, if I can become who I want to become or make these shifts in a month, it's literally possible for everyone. It's really simple. It's like, just in practice is hard. But to answer your question, Nolan, I think for me, we've been spinning these three plates for the better parts of 3 years, all of them which I'm incredibly passionate about. The media company, which is kind of the engine to everything. That's how we started. The Twitter account, the podcast, being able to give as much free content to people as possible. The supplement company, so actually creating a supplement that's in line with our nutritional beliefs that can also make people healthier. And then a marketing agency that really powers a lot of these incredibly based brands that we believe in, giving them a voice so more customers know about them, and we can kind of turn away from this paradigm of these ultra processed food companies essentially quietly monopolizing the entire market. So I'm really passionate about those three plates, but I think up until August, I self-identified as a podcaster that had these other brands. And I was noticing that I really loved the marketing agency, even though the intention was starting it as a side project just to make income to support the show. Realized that I love the supplement company. I love building businesses in the health and wellness space. So my identity shift is that I want to be a man that can build successful businesses in the health and wellness space that ultimately make people happier and healthier, ideally bring them closer to God too, be able to financially support my family, leave a legacy, and just like enjoy every single day of what I'm doing.
That's a pretty worthy goal, I'd say.
Yeah.
I'd say this is a little shift we always have. I mean, we have like good banter in the office. We'll say, we're going to win. We've talked about this, but like the idea of saying, why going? If it's in the future, then it's not going to happen. If it's always in the future, it's not here.
Yes.
We are winning right now. That vision is coming forth literally right now in this instant. I think that's part of the reason that I tweeted the other day, like God's providential. You are one moment away from a providential moment that will change the trajectory of your life. And perhaps, like, obviously it's they add onto each other, and it's over time. But like perhaps this August challenge is that moment where like you never look back to where you were.
I know it's the moment, by the way. I know it.
I love that. And I also just started a challenge. I'm going to do a Trips challenge in September. We talked about that. I'm excited for that. There's something to, you mentioned like you don't need a challenge to, you shouldn't need a challenge to make yourself, like put yourself up against the wall. But I'd argue it's exactly what you needed, because Tucker Carlson said this once. I love it. If a man doesn't have to do anything, he won't. If he has to do something, he'll do everything. So it's something to that effect. Like, it's that idea. It's like if you put yourself up against the wall, I think part of the discipline of becoming a good man, from my perspective as a young man, is being able to put yourself up against the wall when you don't have to. Because there are people like you and I know, Khalil, who we know, Nate, like other examples of where like life puts them up against the wall.
Yes.
I think you and I were not, we're perhaps blessed in a way to not have that. There's obviously positive and negatives to everything, but like I don't consider myself to ever have been, by the cards that I've been dealt by God, to be put up against the wall where like if I don't fucking do something, pardon my language, if I don't do something, then I'm not going to be able to eat. So it's like, I'm just curious if you relate to that, like the idea of forcing yourself to put your back against the wall. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it absolutely makes sense. And I relate to you too, because for anyone here that hasn't listened to Founders Podcast, I'm sure you've talked about it multiple times. Go listen to Founders Podcast. Yeah. And you notice this theme with a lot of the great men that they profile on that show, is that a lot of them came from really tough family situations, or like from the time they were a child, their back was up against the wall. And to resonate with what you're saying, I grew up in like an incredibly fortunate background. Amazing parents. Dad was successful, played baseball, had a bunch of scholarships. Like I literally didn't have any adversity growing up outside of like whatever my perceived adversity was from baseball. And so I had a moment in the spring where when I really started to dig into Founders for the first time, I was like, am I not destined for success because I don't have that level of adversity that a lot of these guys that I admire grew up with? But I think to answer your question, it's ultimately just about you have to create the skin in the game for yourself. Like I get on the calls with a lot of younger guys that are in corporate America that ultimately want to do something similar to what I'm doing. And my advice to them is always that little whisper in the back of your head, that little whisper will never go away. And the older you get, the harder it's going to be to pull out of that salary, those bonuses, that stability. So whatever you could do to like kill off that version of yourself and just get the fuck out of there and just find something else to do. I mean, you're the perfect example of that, dude. Like literally starting your podcast, recognize that you weren't cut out for the corporate cloth, You started off as a ghostwriter, just writing tweets and putting together Instagram content, and now you're building out our entire business development pipeline. I have no doubt that you're going to go do whatever you want to do in the space, whether it's starting brands, scaling this podcast to a top podcast to support men. But the thing is you actually took action. And that's what's so tough to teach, is that, like Alex Hormozi just said on Chris Williamson's podcast, if you're listening to this podcast right now where we're speaking, you've listened to thousands of other podcasts of people talking about, personal development and personal sovereignty and all these really helpful playbooks to live the best life possible. I mentally masturbated to those for so long and never took action. And it's almost more frustrating the more content you consume, but you just feel like a pussy because you're not taking action. And I'm guessing it's instilled by God, but I think every man just kind of needs to have this moment where they just snap and just decide to go to the gym or make 25 extra sales calls or put in a 16-hour night at work, or just you just have to do different things. That's one of the things that Khalil told me. To go back to your earlier question of what changed. Noble's had some supply chain issues just because we've grown so fast. It's a good problem to have. But Khalil, who's the owner of Sun Life Organics, which is an incredible smoothie shop in the country, he was one of our first investors, and he's also an advisor of the brand. So we sell Noble in his store. So he really, up until last week, he didn't have product for close to 2 months. And, I was giving him the excuses of our manufacturer didn't do right by us. And he just cut me off and gave me some really tough love. And he was like, dude, I think you have these really impressive goals on paper, and I think it makes you feel good when you tell me this, that you want this company to get acquired in 2 to 3 years. You guys want to do 100 million in revenue. You guys want to help make people healthier. But I don't know if your goal is a fantasy, or if you're willing to actually have that skin in the game and take action, or if you just really like talking about it. And that was like a gut punch. And I didn't get pissed off. I didn't get defensive. And you want to know why? Because I knew he was exactly right. And if I actually was true to my word, I would have literally been at the manufacturer's facility with a baseball bat trying to get product. You know what I mean? So it's just, it takes what it takes. And there's still a shitload of work that I want to do, that I know you want to do, that the audience wants to do. And my life now is just consumed with, how do I just go to bed and just have that feeling where I couldn't have done anything more. And I just want to die on that hill.
Yeah, dude, there's so much to unpack there. Firstly, I love you said it takes what it takes. We talked about this yesterday, but the idea that Bobby, I'll mention him again because he's profoundly changed my life in many ways, as you probably are aware of. He said he went to Bob Proctor, so he was working with Bob Proctor. Went to him one day. He had this goal, this big goal. He's like, Bob, I've done everything that I can. And I'm pretty sure the story goes, Bob just started laughing at him.
Yeah.
Like, you think that's good enough? Like, is the goal achieved? Like, is the vision that you had in your head a reality right now? Then that's not good enough. You don't have, you don't do everything you can. You do what is required. And that's why I bring that up, is it's not everything you can. It takes what it takes. You have to do what is necessary for that vision to come to fruition. I think one of the ways that I've really tried to build up the idea of getting leverage on yourself. Like, for a great example, I've had the same exact thought about, okay, well, I grew up with loving parents, an amazing home. I love my family. They love me. It was stable. I was allowed to dream. I was allowed to pursue dreams. I was allowed to do a lot of things. Do I not have that tenacity? But then you also hear stories about, JP Morgan's a good example. The Rothschild family is a good example of just like generations building on wealth, Rockefeller family as well. But so the reason I say that is there are examples, many examples of people coming from families that are good families that level up, which in my opinion is the ultimate goal, is to have a positive ROI on my life, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And how I've combated that, or begin to combat that, is like creating leverage on myself. Like, how can I make it where what will it cost me if I don't achieve this? Not like, oh, what will it be like if I do achieve? What will my life, like, what will be the expense of my life if I don't achieve the vision that I want to bring forth? And that's a scary thought to me. Yeah. So it's the idea of like building these levers and this like gravity behind the why of like, why do you want to build these businesses? Why do you want to help people heal? Because you've experienced detriment in your own health. You've experienced that anguish and that agony of like not being healthy. You want to help people heal. So I just love that idea of building leverage. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that before.
All I was going to say was the best way to justify it, if you do come from a successful family and there's like this feeling of guilt or uncertainty around like, am I a dog or not, is just because you started off at mile, like if you started off at mile 10 of the marathon versus mile 1, like a lot of these people that we're talking about, you just have more of an obligation to just do even more with your life. It's like, because you've been given more, you should be producing more too. And you have these amazing blessings, and be grateful that your family worked hard, whether it was your father, your grandfather, your mom, your grandmother, whatever, to put you in that position. Learn from them as much as you can. Be appreciative. Thank God, because you have something that you really ultimately don't deserve. It's a gift. And now you have an obligation to take that gift and multiply it, like the 10-bagger analogy in the Bible.
Yeah, I love that. One thing that I want to go back to on your last couple statements was the idea. We've talked about this before as well, but I'm very curious to hear your take on this. You and I have a slightly different path. We both played college baseball,
Yep.
but I, for whatever reason, I knew from a very young age I would not go the corporate route, like the quote unquote traditional route. I haven't been able to determine why that is exactly. What in my upbringing caused that to be the case, but you went that route, and
Yes.
you were 100% on track to win that game. Like, you were winning that game, and you were on track to win that game, and you did what I think, as you mentioned, is an extremely difficult thing. I think I heard 3 most addicting things in life are sex, drugs, and a salary. It's sort of a twofold question. So you had the cojones to say, I'm done with this. I have more in my life that I want to do than this. I'm not saying it's bad, but you had a calling, and you chose to jump into the abyss, the unknown. And here we are figuring out how to get out of that, or not get out of that, but like to elevate ourselves. To have people that are in that life come to you for advice on how to escape that life, how does that feel? Knowing that you were once fully in it.
I mean, it's definitely encouraging to me. You know, I have a good example. I have a good buddy, Nathan, who's 20, I think he's 25 or 26. He's right around your age. And he went to UVA, really sharp dude.
Go Hokies.
Yep, go Hokies. Had autoimmune issues, and cured his autoimmune issues through an animal-based diet. Was really passionate about it. And then, because he was such a good student and such a good networker and so tenacious, he got a job at Oliver Wyman, which is one of the best consulting companies in the world, and started that job. And he quickly realized that it wasn't ultimately for him. He just felt like this piece of him was missing, and he couldn't push himself to do the work that he ultimately wanted to do. And so he kind of went back and forth on, should I start a podcast? Should I start creating content? Whatever. And so we were just kind of having these mentor-mentee calls where I was just giving him similar advice to what I just said earlier, where it's like, dude, if you feel this calling, you don't have to quit Oliver Wyman yet, but figure out what type of content resonates the best with you. Maybe it's writing, maybe it's podcasting, maybe it's sitting in front of the camera and just recording these 60-second reels of yourself talking about health concepts. I think that's actually pretty unnatural for a lot of people, but either way, whatever is the most natural to you, that's what you should go ahead and do. And then, to his credit, after a few conversations, he came to me and said, hey, I have this part-time job offer with Masa Chips, which is an incredible tallow fried chip company that's blown up. They've raised millions of dollars. I think they're going to revolutionize the pantry. Or I could go take this other fintech job that's going to pay me a really good salary. And I just said to him, I'm like, look, I would never tell you what to do, but based on everything you've told me, the feelings that you have will continue to get stronger the older you get, and you'll actually lose confidence in yourself by the time you're my age, because you knew that this is what you were supposed to be doing, but you didn't have the courage to take action on it. And you're such a talented guy, Nathan, that if Masa Chips doesn't work out, you'll find something else to do in corporate America like that immediately. But I said to him, I was like, what's holding you back? He said, honestly, it's more so just the finances of the part-time job versus the full-time job. And I said, well, either way, I think you should take the part-time job. But if they're telling you there's not a full-time role offered, why don't you create a full-time role for yourself? So we worked together. We put together a whole playbook of his sales process, who we would reach out to, whatever. It took like an hour and a half of work. He just submitted it, and then immediately they offered him a full-time job like 2 days later, and he's been crushing it there. So it's just a long-winded way of saying it's only going to continue to get more difficult as you get older. And I really felt that feeling when I was around your age too. I was always hyper competitive playing baseball. My dad was in sales. I loved the vibe, the energy, the fast-paced culture of New York City. And when I was 21, that's ultimately what I wanted to do, and that's where I wanted to be. I loved it when I was in it. I was the first business development hire at a 30-person fintech startup in the city. was flying across the country, meeting with these CEOs that were 50, 60 years old, trying to pitch them our technology. And I was 23, and that really sharpened me up. And so like a lot of the methodology that I use in terms of how I get guests on the show, the way that I get investors for Noble, the way that we get new clients for the marketing agency, that's from the lessons that I learned at 23. But while I'm working this job, I'm healing from ulcerative colitis, I'm going carnivore, I'm transforming my health, I'm doing these marathons and ultra marathons, and I find myself really gravitating towards that bucket versus sales. And I had this realization in the middle of COVID that I wasn't inherently passionate about what I was doing from a sales perspective. I was just competent at it and I was competitive, but there was something in this like black box of health and wellness that just kept pulling me in. And I would just listen to podcast after podcast and buy product after product. And I always had this imposter syndrome. And I had this realization that I've always wanted to do something entrepreneurial. I'm single. I don't have kids. I don't have any overhead. And then when Harry and I started growing the podcast and the Twitter account started blowing up, I'm like, dude, this is literally your sign from God that this is what you're meant to be doing. And so my thought process was, well, if I can get 2 clients from the marketing agency and just pay for my rent, pay for my food, and break even, I'm good. And then I have like $150K worth of savings that I can live off of if I needed it. And I'm willing to go to zero or whatever it takes to make this thing work. And so it was really the fear of how I would feel when I was 50 not doing this, more so than the potential rewards, which I think is a really good exercise. And you as a man need to understand, am I motivated by the carrot or the stick? And I think there's a place for both. But for me, stick has always been a pretty good motivational factor. So I was very compelled by the vision, and I was also very compelled by the vision of what I didn't want to. So I kind of blended those things together. And dude, in full transparency, it's like, bro, I've blown through most of that 150K, investing in the business, living off of it, months in the red, etc. Like, I don't care. I wouldn't change anything. It's only made me more confident in myself, because what I realized was that I had so much financial attachment to that amount that I had saved up. So being, not in a masochistic way, but having the courage to be like, I will burn the ships to make this work. And now that courage is starting to bear fruit in everything that we're doing. It's just a sign from God, where it's like the more courage you get in, the more courage you get back, and the more that I think he's going to provide for you. So I know that was a really long-winded answer, but I just wanted you to have the full context on just my thought process there.
To me, the fact that, so you like, because we have these attachments with finances for sure, like the status, the implications, that's why the salary can be so compelling, because it's like, oh, well, I make X amount per year, I make X amount per bonus, whatever it is. To me, the fact that you have people who very well might be making more money than you're making now coming to you for advice on how to escape that, because you mentioned courage several times. That's, in my opinion, one of the most sought after or envy-inducing characteristics of men. Like, I think we want courage. That's why we're drawn to people that do ultra marathons. We're drawn to special forces, special operations soldiers that put their life on the line. We're drawn to founders that literally say, I'm going to go all in, like you just said. To me, that is such a freaking green light from God, to have people in the situation that you were in. You had the faith and the courage to take that leap. Now that's like God's way of saying, hey, it's like, even if the monetary or financial result that you're desiring is not here right now, you're getting like these green lights of people reaching out to you to try to help them on that same journey. So I feel like it's just like another green light from God saying, hey, look, you're on the right path. And you're exactly right. I mean, the fruit it's very close. There's a quote that I love. That's kind of arrogant. I came up with it. It's really like a culmination of several quotes, but it's the idea that you have to be able to tend to your garden without seeing the fruit to be able to eat the fruit one day. And that sort of stems back to what I was saying about belief comes before ability. Because if you only acted in such a way where the fruit was immediately available, you would never get any fruit.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Think about that, dude. Weeks of work, like toiling in the soil, tending to the garden for one day worth of fruit. And that one day is so fucking worth it, man. I wish more people understood that, honestly.
100%.
And to your point, Nolan, the thing is with social media, there has been like, it really, in 2024, it truly is the best time ever to start a business. Like, I really believe all the resources are there. You can whip up a Shopify site, get a product from a manufacturer, and sell it within a couple weeks. I'm firmly confident of that because that's what we did with Noble. But I think it's so important for men listening to this to really get that quiet reflection time and just stream of consciousness, just journal out where you are, where do you want to be? Like, because I think because there's so much pro entrepreneurial content, not everyone is cut out for founder life, to be honest with you. Like, there is so much pain and adversity and second guessing and quiet nights by yourself and nights where you feel like you just pissed everything away and you're not going to be able to make rent or pay your employees. Like, there's a lot of stress associated with that. So my point in saying that is that there's nothing wrong if you're at a corporate job and you love it and you find the work meaningful. The problem is that if you're in that job and you think it fits on paper, but there's that black box or that part of your mind that just keeps coming back, that's when you need to do more self-examination, self-journaling. Like, I don't believe in just shitting on the corporate job for the sake of doing that. I think that's a very Austin thing to do. It's more so like, because there's a lot of beauty in that, being able to provide for your family. That's what my dad did. He's worked 2 jobs his entire career, gave me and my family the best possible life, like a real fucking man. There's nothing wrong with that path. It's just that if you're on that path and you feel like there's something missing, that's when you have to get into the lab and figure out what's wrong with you.
Yeah, that's extremely valuable. I would reiterate that as well. I think it's very important not to just shit on corporate jobs, because think about this, the quality of life enhancement that people like your father working those jobs has increased, if that makes sense. Like, the amount of families that have had solid upbringings, the amount of children that have had the ability to live good, stable, and productive and positive childhoods because of folks like your dad working those jobs. You're exactly right. That's providing. But I think that's an interesting concept. If that's not you,
yes,
then there's something missing, and digging into what that is. I'm curious if, on the topic of business, entrepreneurship, the stress. Oh, to mention something, there's a quote David Sinner always says, Founders Podcast, once again. I've told like 50 people.
It's that good.
It's insane.
It'll change your life.
100%,
It'll change your life.
100%. He always talks about how the founder's life is like this seesaw between ecstasy and terror.
Yes.
And you can relate to that, obviously. But there's this idea from Count of Monte Cristo, my favorite book. At the end of the book, the Count of Monte Cristo is talking to a group of young people. If you haven't read the book and you have a year,
read it.
Yeah, it's a 1,200-page book, but it's literally one of the most incredible stories I've ever heard. But he said something to the effect, there is no such thing as like an actual state in life. It's the comparison between one state and another. So only those who know the depths of suffering can know the heights of felicity. Is there anything that's more apropos for a founder's life? I don't think so, because as you mentioned, you have these nights of like, holy crap, we just increased rev like 50% this month, or like, oh my gosh, we might not be able to make payroll this month, or whatever. All these stresses and these triumphs are so polar. Like, it's very high highs and very low lows. What's one thing or a couple things that you've done that have helped you get through those low lows?
It's a great question. I appreciate you asking that. I think number one, if you're building a business, I think it's incredibly important to connect with other founders, because number one, you can learn from them. There's a relatability factor. There's almost like this joy in shared suffering. And I've been fortunate where I built up a really good community of like older mentors that have 10, 20 plus years of experience than I do. And you learn that, oh, the problems that I'm going through, they all went through similar problems, and actually way worse than I did too. Like, it's all going to work out. And it doesn't, if you don't have a mentor or someone that can talk about what I just mentioned, that's why that's why you keep talking about the Founders Podcast, is because Senra's doing a biography a week about a different founder that impacted history. You build these virtual relationships with these founders, and you learn from their successes, their mistakes, their decision-making process, and you just start to bake their DNA into your own DNA. It's this really cool shift that happens when you start digging through that podcast. And then secondly, something I think I could do a lot better job of, which I have done before, and I think I kind of do it subconsciously, is Tim Ferriss's fear setting exercise. And so he basically makes you list out every fear that you have in the business. It also works for your personal life too. And then he forces you to write out 1 to 2 to 3 solutions for each problem. And just by doing that, it makes you realize, oh, I'm worried about making payroll, but I could do this. Or like, hey, I'm worried about revenue, but I could do this. It makes you realize that every problem that's keeping you up, there is some solution. And there's a great book. The title's terrible. It's called Straight Line Leadership. And the author tells you to reinterpret problems just as a decision to make. This is not a problem. This is just a decision I have to make. And my goal is from getting from point A to point B just as fluidly as possible.
That's an interesting model. I've never thought of that. It's not a problem. It's a decision to make. Decisions are scary. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I love the idea of, I've never done fear setting, but I'm a firm believer in the idea of utilizing leverage. This is another great way of leverage there. Because I think people that are like, I guess this stems into another conversation, like happiness seekers or like people that prioritize happiness over everything. I think they're missing out on a massive amount of fuel or leverage. An example of that, Jordan Peterson talks about this, but like having something to run towards and something to run away from. If you only have something to run towards, that's good. You have fuel for that. But there's also this fear, which I really just, I don't believe that it's a tool, because when you overcome fear, that's even more momentum in the good direction. I just love that. Have you heard, I think it's Romans 5:8. Don't quote me on that, but the verse is something to the effect of, we rejoice in our sufferings.
Yes.
Because suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, hope, and we shall not be forsaken by hope, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I love that idea, because when you're in the trenches, when you're having those months where it's like, dude, I might not be able to pay rent.
Yeah.
Like there's just this switch. Instead of being a problem, it's like, okay, well, how can I utilize this to move forward and create more perseverance, which will 100% inevitably benefit me, my family, my tribe, and the world in the long run. I think the reason I brought the happiness thing up is people that don't have that perspective, I think, miss out on that. They miss out on like the added fuel to the fire. It's the same thing with haters. Like haters are valuable in my, like, obviously, like my haters are my motivators, whatever that cliche is, but there's real value in that. Like there's real value in somebody said you can't do it. Keep that in the back of your mind. Don't ignore it. Like, don't just write that off as nothing. That is something. Like, use it if you need to. But I just think it's a healthy and beneficial balance to have that thing that you're running toward and away from. And the last thing I'll mention on that, there was a study about rats and cheese. Have you ever heard of this study?
I don't think so.
Okay, so as far as I understand it, they had a rat, and it was in like a tube, and they had a spring attached to its tail. That could measure how much force it was putting in the direction it was facing. And they wafted in the smell of cheese from the front. This represents the thing that you're going towards, that your vision that you want to bring to fruition. And they measured how much force the rat took in that direction. Keep that in mind right there. They measured it. Then what they did was they put the smell of a cat and they wafted in from the back. They measured the force that the rat put in the direction forward, away from the cat, without the variable of the cheese. What situation do you think the rat put in more force to go forward?
The cat.
The cat. So embrace the cat, I guess, is the way to say that. It's like embrace that, you know?
It's what that analogy is what we just talked about, of like that voice in the back of your head and like reflecting on understanding, am I pulled by the carrot or the stick? And the stick can be a really strong motivator too.
What is the stick? I've never heard this analogy before.
It's like an old analogy about how people are motivated with like certain animals. They would give them a carrot to make them behave well, or if they didn't behave well, they would hit them with the stick. Gotcha. So it's like the two types of, it's literally exactly what you just 100%. Said too. And to the Romans, I
think it's 5:8.
5:8,
but it could be.
It reminds me, there's this great YouTube channel called Gravemind, where they'll take compilations of like Earl Nightingale, Napoleon Hill, etc., and just splice them together with like movie clips and stuff like that. I just love to throw it on the car mindlessly and just keep brainwashing myself for success. But there's an Earl Nightingale quote in one of the videos where it was like, I thought that life was duty. I woke up from my dream and realized that I thought that life was joy. I woke up and realized that life was duty. Therefore, duty is joy. So the more weight and duty that you bear as a man, the more joy I think you'll ultimately have at the end of it. And so it's a good reframe to realize, like, I'm at a point now where I've done a lot of networking the last 5 to 10 years of my life, especially the last 2 years being in Austin. And relationship building is always going to be something that I do. But I'm also at this very critical inflection point that I realize that relationship building right now, to a certain extent, can be mental masturbation. And I'm vehemently convinced that there are a few unsexy, deep work related tasks that I need to lock in on that I think can transform all of our lives. And so going to that dinner that I would have gone to 4 months ago, like, that doesn't make the cut anymore. You know, like watching Netflix because I'm burnt out from a long day, like that doesn't make the cut anymore. What makes the cut right now is prioritizing my relationship with God, my girlfriend, brothers like you, and then deep work and going to the gym. That's my phase of life right now.
That's powerful because, I mean, you and Harry are incredibly well connected in Austin, all over the world, really. And there is so much value from that. I mean, as you've been able to see and experience in real time, but there is this idea that networking can 100%, it can be mental masturbation because you think, oh, it's like, well, this is productive. But is it the most important thing you could be doing?
Yes.
And there's this idea that's like creating lists is great, which I create lists. It's like how my mind works. But instead of creating these lists of all these different things that I can be doing, it's like, well, what's the number one thing that I need to be doing right now? And then why am I not doing that?
Yes.
Because imagine the domino size 10 iterations down the line if you just knock down the most important domino right now. Instead of saying, oh, well, this is an important domino, but I could also network and who knows where this relationship could lead, blah, 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 blah. Well, but like that's not the most important thing. And there may be contexts where that is the most important thing. Raising money, obviously you have to reach out to people and things of that sort. But I just love that idea. It sounds like you're reprioritizing. And there's this idea from Essentialism, which is a great book. You know what priority means?
No.
It means the first thing. So you see these business initiatives, the example he gives is first priority, second priority, third priority, fourth priority, fifth priority, sixth priority. This is so on down the line. He said that he's worked with companies with like 15, 20 priorities on their list. That's actually that's at odds. That's actually not possible to have 20 priorities because that means 20 first things.
Yes.
So you have one first thing, and then what is it? And then you iterate from there. It's like, okay, for you, it's your relationship with God. Every single thing falls under that umbrella. And then once that's taken care of, you move on, and then you work on that. So it's not like this idea we have 15, 20 priorities. There's another analogy that I love that he has in that book. Have you seen the diagram? It's the circle with the energy units.
Yes.
It's a great example of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You have all these, you only have so much energy that you can use, and you could use, say you have 10 units of energy and you go in 10 different directions. You can go an inch in 10, or one energy unit in 10 directions, or you can go 10 energy units in one direction. To me, it's evidently clear what would produce more fruit in your life and in the life of others if you prioritize in the real sense of the word, if that makes sense. And it sounds like that's what you're doing.
Yeah. I've always resonated a lot with Tim Grover's work.
Relentless, Michael Jordan?
Yeah, Michael Jordan's trainer. Started off on like a month-long trial, worked with him for 20 plus years, which is an incredible story. And I think the reason why his work is so good is that I think he realistically portrays the cost that is required for the goals that you want to have. And again, I think the reason why August has been so impactful is it's made me just realize, like, what am I willing to give up for what I want? And what am I willing to not give up for what I want too? So for me, it's like, I have the full intent to marry my girlfriend, Dana. If my work got in the way of our relationship, it's not worth it for me. Like I can firmly say I'm not willing to burn the boat on that relationship. But there are a lot of other things where I'm like, dude, you're prioritizing this thing because you're worried about pissing off this person or looking good publicly or you feel whatever it is. You're prioritizing that over the work that could make millions of people healthier and financially transform the lives of the people that you work with and yourself too, and set your family up for generations. Like, I think that's a pretty noble goal. So you're going to let this like dinner because you're going to go to this dinner that you don't want to go to, or go to this like party that you don't want to go to because you want to be seen in public, versus like confidently just like working on your computer for a couple hours or going to the gym. It just depends on like, where do you want to go and how do you want to live your life, and just stop giving a fuck what other people think, which is way easier said than done. But the moment you can free yourself from that and just be like, this is who I am, this is how I'm wired, this is where I want to become, there's so much gold that comes from that, dude. It's true freedom.
Dude, the idea of the elegant decline is something that I've been thinking about. Me and my buddies even started throwing around like our own challenge that we might launch at some point, where it's like one of the primary factors or parts of the challenge is saying no. Like, you have to say no to a certain amount of things because we all get asked for things, right? And the other thing about that is being seen in public at the party or being seen with these people at the dinner or whatever. It's also, for me, at least in my experience, I don't want to like piss somebody off, or I don't want to, I don't want to like make them, like maybe they really want me to go. That's a disservice to me and I think it degrades my integrity and conviction as a man. And there's this paradigm that I love. I love thinking, and I try to simplify things because my mind's fucking, I go a lot of directions. I try to simplify things so I can remember them. Certain paradigms like investing over spending, like that paradigm, when I think about something like time as an investment rather than an expense, when I think about education over entertainment, creation over consumption, things of that sort. Another one that I love is respect over popularity. Respect, and I'll ask you this, what's more important to you? Would you rather be respected or popular?
I think all men, if they don't believe this, they're lying. I think all men want to be respected and feared to a certain extent.
Exactly. 100%. I agree with that wholeheartedly. There's this idea that I think in the modern society is like, that's how you get respected. But I think it's actually the antithesis. Like, being able to say no is a challenging thing in some circumstances. It can create contention, and people don't like operating with even a minor level of conflict. One thing I've been trying to get better at, and it sounds like you're getting better at, is the idea of not prioritizing respect for the sake of being respected, but like respect is a byproduct. Popularity is an intention. Like, if you want to be popular, for the most part, you have to put yourself in circles and be like super kind to people and go out all the way and like put yourself out there in a way that's not super antagonizing. But to be respected is a byproduct of being true to who you are, and being true to who you are is prioritizing the thing or things that are the most important to you. Does that make sense? Like, so there's, Simon Quibb is Simon Q. He does like these videos. Do you have a dream? And then he like talk.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Make happen. How can we make that happen right now? It's like,
yeah.
He's had successful businesses, has a lot of followers, and he posted something. He asked something of Alex Hormozi, and then he posted Alex Hormozi's response with his permission, I believe. He asked Alex Hormozi to do something, and Alex Hormozi sent him this very simple and elegant message, the elegant decline, which going back to that, he goes something to the effect of, Simon, I like, your reputation precedes you, and like I respect you and your business, so I wanted to do you the service of replying. However, I will not be accepting your invitation for X, Y, or Z, something. But it was like, Simon was like, wow, this is one of the most incredible declines I've ever had. I respect him more for this. I understand his intention. I understand that he has other priorities. Bam, good to go.
Yeah.
As opposed to Alex Hormozi could have gone, this guy's big. I could be more popular. I could get more views. I could be less true to myself. Like, who knows? He decided that was not as important to him. So I just love that paradigm of respect being greater than popularity and operating with that paradigm in mind.
To your point, Noel, I think for some reason, one of the characteristics or flaws that God has instilled in the majority of humans is just this people-pleasing thing by nature. And it's ultimately, there are a lot of goods to it. I think typically people that are people pleasers are also probably good at sales. They're probably good at building relationships. But then when you have a founder's hat, or just any person that wants to bear weight, that can definitely get in the way of you. So one of the things that my coach Chris did is he gave me an exercise where he made me make a list of 25 things that I was procrastinating. And what's really interesting, like, you have to get to 25 things, and everyone will hit 25 things. It's just going to happen, because I guarantee you there's that amount of things that you're putting off that you should be doing. And the cool thing about that list is you start to notice common themes. And so I think 10 plus items on that list of 25 for me were difficult conversations or decisions that stemmed from people pleasing. So because I said yes or didn't address the critical thing, this is something you and I have talked about off camera, I now have to go pull the ripcord out and then correct what I effed up on earlier, because I just didn't have the confidence or the courage to say no or spoke my honest truth. And it's not easy, but I think doing things like as simple as going to the gym at 5 a.m., doing a hard workout, eating a really clean diet, it just starts to, there are like these amazing ripples that pop up in your life where you just have more vim and more vigor and more confidence where you can say no. And like, are you going to let saying yes to something you don't want to do get in the way of that person you want to become or that dream life you want to live? I have this really weird paradox in my mind where by the time I have kids, because I'm starting to enter that age where I'm really thinking about having a family, I'll James Dyson it if I have to, like remortgage the house. But at the same time, I'm vehemently convinced that by the time I have my first child, my family will be financially set up for life. So my point in saying that is, are you going to let a fucking HBO Game of Thrones session get in the way of setting your family up for life? Are you going to go to this dinner that you want to go to and get in the way of setting your family up for life? There's so many decisions like that where it's like you're saying no to this and saying yes to that. And I think when you look at it from that framework, it's just powerful and just makes you reevaluate the way you make every single decision. And I'm not saying become this like neurotic psychopath and like say no to all activities and relationships and stuff like that. I'm just saying that if you want these certain goals, your actions have to reinforce it. Otherwise, you're just fantasizing and you're dreaming.
Yeah, that's a great point. What comes to mind for me is the dissonance that gets created when you're not living the way that you're mentioning, when you're not training hard, when you're not eating well, when you know that you're slacking or maybe it's indulging in certain things that you shouldn't be indulging in. And we've spoke about this before as well, but like the idea that like how if you're going to do that and you're going to negate or dilute your integrity and conviction in one area, that 100% rears its head in other areas. So if let's just say you're not working out very hard, you're waking up later, or later than you want, you're not eating what you need to, you're eating junk food, you're watching porn, you're partaking in whatever it is that you don't want to be partaking in, and you also have this goal of having these conversations, how the hell do you expect to have confidence and conviction enough to have that conversation that's difficult if you're literally sacrificing your conviction in 5 other areas?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I view it as like a conviction muscle, and this is why I love the challenge, because it's like, it is a muscle. You put yourself up against the wall, you have a clear scoreboard. Now you know exactly what the fuck you need to measure. And if you don't meet up to it, then you're not meeting up to it. You have this invigoration to meet up to it. When you meet those goals, when you live that convicted life in these arenas, it makes those early conversations a lot easier. And one thing Jocko Willink says, who you and I both admire and respect greatly, listened to a lot of his podcasts before, consumed a lot of his content. He talks about having hard conversations early. And I love the analogy of the angle. So 1 degree, like if a 1 degree discrepancy at point A, or let's say at 1 inch away from the start point, and 1 degree is very small. It's very, very small, but there is a difference. And we often can notice that difference, whether it be in a work relationship or a romantic relationship or a friendship or whatever it is, there's this discrepancy. So we can write it off. It's like, oh, well, it's only a centimeter right now, whatever. 10 yards down the line, 1 degree becomes a fucking huge discrepancy. And then the amount of willpower, the amount of conviction, the amount of conflict that will arise from a 10-yard difference as opposed to a 1 centimeter difference. Think about that. So it's like this idea of getting to the point, living such a convicted life and being disciplined and having integrity with your actions so that you can have those conversations early on. I think that's so important.
Dude, it's the way you describe it is like this, the angle seems small in the beginning, but the negative ramifications of that angle being off it's cancerous. You know, especially as a startup, dude, you have one bad employee, that's cancer. That could bring down the entire culture. And we had to have a moment last year where we hired someone that we shouldn't have hired. And we were like, dude, I literally looked at myself and I'm like, you're too much of a coward to have this difficult conversation. And so instead of just confronting the truth, clipping it right there and being able to hopefully create a ton of value for your investors, you're going to blow their money away because you're too much of a coward to have a difficult conversation. And so again, it's like that feeling just has to eventually consume you to the point where it pulls you to make a change. And like with this challenge, dude, momentum is so incredible. I hope we link to the challenge in the show notes, because what's going to happen is day 1 to 2, you're going to be all motivated. You're going to pop out at 4:50 in the morning. You're going to want to go to the gym. You're going to want to cold plunge. You're going to want to stick to your diet. And then days like 3 to 7, the reality of the situation sets in where like you'll probably go to bed at like 11 or 12 and you have to wake up at 5 a.m. And I even noticed with myself, I was supposed to do 3 minutes of cold water. I'd go in for a minute. I'd keep my hands out. I'd go do a couple different rounds, hit 3 minutes. I'd go through the motions at the gym. I'd really be white knuckling those meals. And then after day 7 days of compounding is enough to actually start to feel and look different. And people will start noticing. And that's when you get into this really cool spot where you create friction, where you're like, well, normally I would cold plunge after I sauna, but instead I'm going to cold plunge before I sauna, just go in completely cold to make it more difficult. Oh, I don't want to go do a set of pull-ups at the gym, therefore I'm going to run over to the pull-up bar and go do a set of pull-ups. Oh, hey, I had this Google video call for work and I didn't mean what I said on the call and I patronize this guy, I'm going to go call him up right now and just correct my fuck up before. Like, it's like, it just makes you crave friction in every aspect of your life. And when you're at a point of craving friction, really good things are going to happen.
Yeah, because the more friction you can overcome. I think that that's obviously nuanced. Like, there are certain things where it would behoove you to make it less friction. But in terms of like that's how you build the muscle.
Yeah.
Like, you have to be able to build the muscle.
Yes.
And the only way you do that is by overcoming friction, because God knows, I mean, you and I are both technically, we're unmarried, no children. Yeah. This is something I think about. Like, dude, think about the 50-year-old guy who runs a $100 million a year business, has 50, 100, however many employees. They have 4 children. They have a wife. I've sat here and thought about, I'm like, dude, that's a lot to fucking hold. Like, you're juggling a lot of balls. How do they do that? I don't think it's possible without in a positive way, without abusing drugs or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's possible without what you're talking about, without being able to say no, without being convicted in your priorities.
Yeah.
So I just think that's so important to be able to build that muscle. And that's exactly how you do it. It's also very cool to see like the real-time results of that. Like you mentioned 26, 27 days. Like, that's 27 days where you are exponentially different and better version of yourself than you were 28 days ago.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating.
Yeah. And the thing too is, like, the way that I'm speaking, I hope people realize that, like, I'm very consciously aware of the fact that I've barely even been going at it for a month. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of work to be done. And the way that I'm speaking isn't just a reminder for you, the audience member that's listening to this. I'm also speaking this into myself too, to just make those principles like rooted as part of my soul, because I want this to be my operating ethos. But everything we talked about, it's like, if you do that journaling exercise, you know exactly what you need to do. And it's probably not going to be easy, but it's so simple that if you just do it, your life is going to drastically get better. And I just hope that everyone that's listening to this takes this advice seriously and implements it. And I guarantee you that January of 2025, you're going to be a totally different person in terms of your spirituality, your relationships, your business, your finances, the way that you walk with your shoulders back and your chest puffed out. There's the way that you stare at people. There's just this aura that comes from that. And I just want to be proof of work and just ultimately, make guys like you proud, make my family proud, make myself proud. And if I can do that, be a life well lived.
Yeah. I have one more question. I love the idea of like, what's some good advice, or like what advice I've asked this question many times. What advice would you give yourself? Like, what do you know now that you wish you knew then? What advice would you give your younger self? I think a much more difficult question to answer is what's the worst advice that you've gotten? So the question is, what's the worst advice in, let's say the realm of business, because I think that can be extrapolated. What's the worst business advice that you've gotten since you've left your corporate job? Or even, let's stick with that. What's the worst advice you've gotten?
I would say when I was working a corporate job, it was picking my next role based on the credibility of the firm and the salary, because I ended up leaving that fintech company that I loved, that I was an integral part of, that I grew more in that role than anything else, and took a job at a massive consulting company because they doubled my salary. And, I was at this consulting company, and Microsoft was our biggest client, and it made so much sense on paper. Brother, I literally got in the first day and I knew, I was like, this is going to be an absolute disaster. This is not me. What did I just get myself into? And so it was honestly fuel in a way, because I found gratitude in that and just worked as hard as possible to build up Meat Mafia so I could break out of that. But when you're young, it is so much more important to be able to find a company where you can have a really good mentor that will invest in you, and you are a sponge, and just like you want to immerse yourself in the culture. You love the work that you're doing, and every single day you're just building up competency. That's why I look back at that startup role being so influential in my development, because we were so young and we had a great leadership team. I was just like lapping up everything, especially if you have that sponge-like mentality. And I think the worst advice I've gotten since I left corporate is to bring in a bunch of specialists and experts. One of the things that I've learned the last year is it's so easy to outsource your power to people that have more experience than you. And I think it is 1,000% important to have a almost like a board of directors of people that can give you advice that you respect, that are in a place that you want to be in. But at the end of the day, when you're a founder, your gut instinct is what got you to the place that you're currently in. And your gut instinct is probably going to be responsible for those like massive exponential level breakthroughs. So take advice from people, implement certain pieces of it. But if that advice isn't jiving with your gut, you have to listen to your gut instinct, which again is easier said than done. But you're a founder because of your gut instinct. You did the work. You're the founder. You founded the thing that you're doing. And that's ultimately what's going to help you scale to the next level. So don't outsource your power.
That's a great answer. What came to mind for me is the idea that when you ask for advice for a bunch of things, it could be as simple as a tweet, or how to word an email, or who to reach out to for this, or what agency to hire for this, or who to hire for this position, or what's the strategy here. The more advice that the more advice that we incur or bring on, that we take, the more it dilutes the responsibility.
Yes.
Because in our heart of hearts, we go, oh, well, no, well, that guy gave me that advice.
Yeah.
So it wasn't me. It dilutes responsibility. It takes away your power, which is comforting. Because if you make a decision and you know that you are your own advisor and it's the wrong decision, who has to sleep with that?
Yeah.
You. But then again, it's, as you mentioned, it's the thing that got you to where you are. So I love that answer. That's really good. I feel like sharing this because I think you'll like it. Lucas Pachter, I had on the podcast a couple weeks ago, went live today. I asked him a similar question, and I fucking love his answer. He went right out of college, started his business in college, multiple $1 million business already, 23, 24 years old. He met with like a CMO or something that he was connected to via his family and told him about this business. What do I do? What do you think I should do? And the guy said, don't do it. This is an awful idea. And so he said that's the worst advice he's ever got, is don't do it. Because I don't know. I just felt like mentioning that because that was such a good answer in my opinion. Like, don't take the jump.
Yeah.
Don't take the leap. Don't leave the corporate job. Don't start your own thing. Don't trust your gut. I just love that idea. But
kudos to him, bro. There's so many people, 99% of people, maybe even me when I was that age, that would have listened to that. And there's like this beautiful life on the other end of that if you had just trusted your gut instinct and your backbone. It could have ended up being this life unlived, but he trusted himself. And look at all probably the wealth he's created for himself, the employees that he's brought up. Like there's like this beautiful world that was possible because he ultimately trusted his backbone.
yeah, and he did it.
He did it.
Just do it. Man, this is awesome. We'll have to do this again soon.
Yep.
Really appreciate you, Brett. I want to reciprocate the compliment that you gave me at the beginning. I think one of the biggest blessings in my life is reaching out to Harry, getting connected with you guys. I was telling somebody last night actually how funny it was. I sent Harry that video. He's like, hey, let's go get coffee. So we got coffee. At coffee, he's like, hey, we're going to church tomorrow. You want to come? Came to church, met you. He's like, hey, we're doing a run club on Monday. You want to come? Went to run club, met you even more, got connected. Here we are, right on the anniversary, about a year from then. And you're one of my trusted advisors. You're one of my closest friends. You're one of the men that I look up to and respect in the most in life. So I'm happy to be on the battlefield with you. I'm happy that you're in my foxhole. Let's keep winning, man.
Love you, brother.
Love you too, bro.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, brother.
Cool.